And welcome to the Daily Space Weather Show. It's going to be a brief one tonight, but we've got some geomagnetic storm conditions, so plenty to talk about. The likelihood of X-class solar flares continues for at least another about 18 hours. As we've got a setting sunspot group down here in the southwestern limb. So that group there is entirely likely still to produce X-class solar flares. We've also seen some filamentary activities, some rather spectacular coronal mass ejections, and lots of giant plasma filaments pointed right at the Earth. Here you can see some of those right in the center of the solar disk, the most likely places for them to end up striking Earth should they eject. So this filament up here in the northwest has become unstable. Part of it has ejected. Also, this one down in the southeast is in the process of gyrating around. Part of it's ejecting out of the southern polar region right now. Part of it is looking like it's reorienting itself. We'll cover it on the GOES 16 SUVI. And before we get to things like coronal mass ejections and coronal holes and sunspots, here is today in 304 angstroms, and there you can see those filamentary motions happening. Yeah, welcome to the real Daily Space Weather Show, and if you enjoy the content, don't forget to press the like button. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to press subscribe. Otherwise, how would you get the world's most comprehensive daily space weather content directed straightly to delivered straight to your YouTube subscription feed? How else would you get it without subscribing to the Smash News Network least busted name in news? As we approach solar maximum, the coverage will only get better and better. It's exciting times to be covering space weather. Let's take a brief look at planet Earth. Volcanoes include Ibu, which is exploding, producing a 13,000-foot ash plume. Semeru, 15,000-foot ash plume. Ducono there also exploding. Not sure about Popocatépetl, but Sancho Guido, volcanic ash not detected there. Fuego in Guatemala exploding. Sangay in Ecuador, also Revenador and Sabancaya. 24,000-foot ash plume from the Peruvian volcano. There in the past 90 days of earthquake activity. And Taiwan continues to gyrate. We'll call out quakes of a 5 and greater magnitude like this 5.0 near the South Sandwich Islands. Not too many people likely to have been feeling that one, although this one at Indonesia. Indonesia is a pretty populated place. That 5.0 occurred at 13:43 Universal Time this afternoon on April 26th. Solomon Islands also had a 5.1, and then we see two major aftershocks there at Taiwan, a 5.7 and a 5.4. Those all between 1821 and 1850 Universal Time this evening. 10.7 centimeter radial flux is now down to 167. 167 solar flux units is the radial flux. There's the 1 year graph. The black line is the radial flux. And yes, we have recently seen the highest radial flux and sunspot number of solar cycle 25, and you can expect that to get even higher as we're still like 5 months away from solar maximum. Solar maximum. You can't really tell when it is until after it's occurred, and you see a real downtick in solar activity. But it's always going to be right around 11 years. I mean, maybe we'll see a vastly different length of a solar cycle, but if we do, that's going to be something that's pretty scary for real. What we aren't seeing is that. We're seeing very much like similar to 11-year cycles. I mean, solar cycle 24 was kind of long and it was kind of weak. So that's what happens. Strong solar cycles seem to be a little bit faster, or you could say of shorter time duration. As far as forecasts, NOAA's not forecasting any CME impacts, but ESA is. So here's NOAA's forecast. Let's just skip that and move to ESA. ESA is forecasting a double impact. So, of course, they've been agreeing with the channel. So we've been showing these Enlil spirals from the European Space Agency. So yeah, tomorrow and Sunday. So tomorrow night might be a very spectacular night for seeing the aurora, even at mid-latitudes. We got our fingers crossed for that one. Again, we've got geomagnetic storm conditions right now. We might see some aurora down here in Pennsylvania tonight. So clear skies. If everything works out right, maybe we'll be sharing some auroral imagery with you tomorrow. But again, like I said, 2 more CME impacts on the way. ESA agrees with what we've been forecasting on the channel. See previous daily space weather videos for details if you've missed out. Here are the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space, and we've got quite a bit of pressure out there. Magnetohydrodynamic pressure, that is. So that's the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from about 12 Earth diameters. Geomagnetic storm conditions. Earth's magnetic moment from the ground, looking like that. Again, we may see some mid-latitude aurora tonight. Fingers crossed for that. That'll be exciting if it happens. Also some perturbations happening there around the equatorial part of the planet. So yeah, KP 5.33, it's a legit geomagnetic storm, a G1 class geomagnetic storm. And it's caused by this most recent CME impact, which arrived, this coronal mass ejection arrived sometime around 1500 Universal Time this afternoon. You can see that sudden shift in the magnetic field. Also the the phi angle rapidly shifts there. And seeing some strong magnetic fields there. So here's the Discover's data. That was the ACE. Discover's data saw the solar wind density make it all the way up to about 25 protons per cubic centimeter. And we are seeing the field strengthening here. So once again, we're having a 13 nanotesla field out there in the solar wind with a BZ of -8. So that's good for inducing some current, although the solar wind density has dropped. So we'll probably drop down to geomagnetic unrest conditions here, assuming we don't see another spike in the solar wind density. So, but that top line is very important, 13 nanotesla with a BZ of -8. That is a thumbs up for the likelihood of geomagnetic storm or unrest conditions to continue. There are our GOES magnetometers. You can see them jumping around quite a bit there. That is what you see when CME impacts happen, so there's some more evidence of that. Next, magnetic sectors. Earth is probably in a South Pole magnetic sector at this point. Well, if not yet, then very soon. So keep in mind that data is over an hour old, nearly 2 hours old when we made the video. Earth is probably already in a South Pole magnetic sector. Here's our line of sight field plot depicting a lot of stuff. Solar polar fields in red and green, solar B field in blue, photosphere magnetism in grayscale, which brings us to coronal holes. There you go. South Pole-oriented coronal holes here rotating into the east. North Pole-oriented coronal holes rotating out of the west. But some more coming in the east as well. So let's switch to the GOES, not the GOES, the SUV, not the SUVI, the SDO. That's what it is. So what you've got here, these are North Pole-oriented. These are South Pole-oriented. And then there are more North Pole-oriented ones back here. South Pole magnetic sector will be short-lived. Let's move on to sunspots. Sunspot number has dipped down to about 135. 135 sunspots, maybe 136, something like that. Here's our flare probability monitor and scoreboard. And again, I would reiterate, we still do have a likelihood of X-class solar flares down there in that southeastern and even southwestern and even in the northwestern limb. So, but especially the southwestern limb, the likelihood of an X-class flare has not yet expired. Give it another 18 hours. By tomorrow's Daily Space Weather video, it will have expired. Let's look at sunspots from SDO. There we are. And we do have a new sunspot that's risen in the northeast. Besides that, we'll see a continued dip in sunspot number, assuming nothing drastic happens between today and tomorrow. Let's move on to solar energetic particles and flares. SEPs, we ain't got none. The GOES proton flux remains at baseline levels. As far as X-rays go, we have seen a little increase here, and it's associated with some activity on the southeastern portion of the sun. as a CME popped off. That is often associated with solar flares. And we're actually having multiple sun-wide events happen here at the same time. We'll get to it in a moment. First, 94 angstroms. Another 24-hour video at 30 frames per second. So that ain't half bad. That's pretty good, in fact. I'm Smasho, and I endorse this imagery. Moving along to a solar system forecast. People want to know where stuff is, so here you go. This is where things are today. We'll advance this 1 week. Mercury's just coming out of retrograde, so everybody can celebrate. Because astrology or something? I honestly have no idea why people talk about Mercury in retrograde. I do not know. Now, if you're viewing the early evening sky, you might catch Jupiter. Jupiter, low in the sky, following sunset. And check it out. It's Regulus. Yeah, Regulus and Leo 1. What's interesting about this satellite galaxy down here is that, well, let's this satellite galaxy, this is known as Leo 1. The most distant of the satellite galaxies orbiting the Milky Way. What's interesting about this one is that it's got a massive radio source in its core that is about the size of Sagittarius A star, the core of the entire Milky Way galaxy. So that little satellite galaxy is located at about 800,000 light years. Now, the Milky Way galaxy is about 100,000 light years in diameter. So you can imagine it as being like 8 Milky Way galaxies away. If you had the Milky Way end to end, or spiral arm to spiral arm, I'll say. Astronomy photo of the day, apod.nasa.gov. Now, CMEs, we have had some spectacular ones. They are not earthly directed. So that's some frames from today, and here's these past few frames. These most recent CMEs, they're not likely to have earthly directed components. We don't think they'll have any earthly directed components. We would show stereo A, but that data is useless because it cuts off sometime yesterday. Yesterday at 1638 or 1753. So that's not gonna cut it. That's not gonna fly. That's not gonna cut it. Let's cut to our custom. Welcome to the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. These are your custom coronagraphs. So yeah, some stuff kicking off, but not in the earthly directed fashion. There we've added 193 angstroms to the SDO imagery in the middle, the solar imagery itself. And once again, we've got lots of filaments pointed at the Earth, so the likelihood of coronal mass ejections in the next 24 hours, well, the likelihood's nearly 100%. Just this side of 100%. But don't take anything for granted, folks, because the local yellow dwarf El Sol, a.k.a. Helios, otherwise known as the Sun, has been known to surprise people. So, look at the filaments. Lots of filaments, lots of filaments. And we do have some prominences as well, continuing. In various locations, anywhere, there they are. The prominences are filaments hanging off the edge. There are filaments, 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 filaments. We got a good half dozen of nameable filaments. And of course this one right in here, that's shaped kind of like an upside down horseshoe or something like that. That's the Larry David filament. So check it out. We got some events going on right now. Some massive coronal mass ejections. So there's a great view of those. Very nice. And like I said, that filament down here, it's kind of like reorienting itself. It looks like it's re-anchoring. Anyway, bonus features are next. Satellite charging hazards, we have some. They're over Southeast Asia. Satellite charging hazards there. That is when low-energy electrons build up outside of spacecraft and can cause some minor communications breakdowns. GOES electron flux here is cratered, as you'll see during coronal mass ejection impacts. No real surprise there. There's a 1-year graph. You can expect that to dip a lot when it is updated. There's a forecast model by NOAA, and it looks like they're going to be a little bit late on their forecast for the dip. Next, the layer where it's measured, the F layer. Feel free to pause the video on this frame if you're not familiar with distances. The F layer is at about 300 kilometers of altitude. There is the vibrational scenario for the bridge between Earth and space. So we should see that moving into a lot more low frequency anomalies here toward the end of the video. Again, we are in geomagnetic storm conditions, so you can expect to see more red there toward the end. And indeed, you are seeing some red popping up there in the northern hemisphere, right where you'd expect it. After all, it is spring in the northern hemisphere. We'll close out with the Global Ionosphere Nowcast. By the way, I had some GPS errors today. It caused me to ride off course while doing a group ride. Yeah, I rode off course 2 times, and then they were chasing me, and then I caught up to them, and then I guess they stopped chasing me because I was behind them because I rode off course. That was fun. So quite a bit of GPS errors can be expected. Look at that total electron content. That is a pretty significant electron content, causing some GPS errors, but more in the southern hemisphere. Anyway, here's the latest. This new sunspot is not looking particularly exciting. It's looking like an alpha class sunspot. There it is. I think that's a new group there in front of it, though, so that'll be something. That'll be a thing. So likely 2 new sunspots getting names. We'll still see a dip in sunspot number until tomorrow. Here comes meteorology, and the low pressure is dominating the U.S. right now. So in the north central plains, you've got that low pressure zone, and that is the dominant feature, besides a bunch of moisture over Texas and Arkansas. Here's our satellite imagery. Oh, did we not show jet streams and surface winds? All right, we'll show jet streams and surface winds. Surface winds of the east shown here. Your jet streams shown here. Central world jet streams. Surface winds. Surface winds of the west. And the jet streams. Satellite imagery. That's what's up. Oh, so good. Every time I see it, it's just stunning. Just stunning imagery there. Just a delight. And here is our humidity map, and look at all the moisture there in eastern Texas, northwestern Arkansas, and southeastern Oklahoma. Very moist, very moist. That is the humidity. Right? Yeah, the humidity. Relative humidity, I'm assuming. Now we've got a bunch of weather warnings, including some winter weather. So we've got some frost advisories, we've got some winter weather advisories, winter weather warnings, and some severe weather warnings, and some flood issues in the central part of the U.S. If your location's lit, head to weather.gov and click your location. Flash flood warnings, all kinds of things happening there. Weather.gov is where we are, and here comes some forecast. GFS 72-hour pressure and precipitation is first. And since much of that precipitation will be in the form of the white powdery stuff, the white slushy stuff, in fact, here's your total accumulated snow depth change forecast. And check it out. It's going to be a dim day in Colorado with all that snow coming. Colorado. All the hot air in the state can't deter all of that snow from falling. Some areas expected to get over a foot. Total accumulated precipitation is next. And look at those areas there that are going to get over 5 inches of rain in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kansas especially. Also Missouri seeing some heavy rains. Heed those flood maps. Temperature anomaly is our last GFS 72-hour forecast. That's temperature anomaly in degrees Celsius. As that low is going to just disintegrate. It's in the process of disintegrating right now. Say goodbye to that low. It's going to turn into a bunch of warm air, basically. It's going to transform. We have had some severe lightning. A huge band of severe lightning. Stretching all the way from Texas to the Great Lakes. And there's our real-time lightning map. It looks like we've got some thunder rolling into Dallas. Look at that line of storms. Geez, that's Reed Timmer worthy. That is likely to be accompanied by damaging wind and hail. So those are going to be training up. It's going to move to the northeast, and it's going to just hit the same areas. Look at this. Look at the number of lightning strikes. That is bonkers. Dag. So, here's our Doppler radar map. And that's a pretty concentrated series of storms there over Texas. And it has to be pronounced Texas. T-E-X'(S) or T-E-X'(Z). Texas. Make sure you tell Smash staff that you say Texas. Your favorite place to drink sody pop on a Friday. Anyway, you've nearly survived another week. Congratulations on that. There's our water vapor map now that we've showed you the visible and the Doppler. As that low is entrained by dry mass of air. Here's your recap. Vertical motion in the air column. Visible satellite. And let's don't forget the water vapor. Anyway, it's time to close this thing out. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to press the things like comment, share. Press share. Share with your friends and foes. Share real facts about space weather and real forecasts about things. And anyway, once again, if you're new, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you next time. Having been your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash, it's time for me to be signing off. And until tomorrow, may that solar wind be at your back.